Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to take your seats, please.
Someone increase the volume on Kira's mic.
Now, there's too much networking happening. That's what's happening. Thank you so much, guys. So, I think there's a lot of connections happening, which is brilliant. So guys, thank you so much. I think as you can see, and even the chats before break, that today's all about connections, and I'm delighted you're all making so many connections. So from France to the west of Ireland, our next roundtable is successfully scaling your business in the west of Ireland. So we have Olive McLucas from the WDC Investment Fund, Fergal O'Connor, the CEO of Buymedia, and Andrew Cameron, CEO of Feeltect.
I'm excited about this panel because sometimes we don't think of Ireland or even Brittany and the other nations as places where we have scaling companies. And to say that we can talk a little bit about real founding stories and that journey and maybe what the future looks like, but also the tools that allow scaling companies to succeed and the support, and that's usually financial. So quickly, I'm going to get each of you to intro yourselves, your name, what you do. If it's a company, what does that company do? And then we'll get into the questions.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Charles. My name is Fergal O'Connor, as Charles said. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Buymedia. And in essence, what Buymedia is, it's an AI advertising technology business, but it's quite a complex platform. So I'll try and make it as simple for everyone as possible. Every business, every organization needs customers. Whether you're a charity, whether you're a business, whether you're an organization trying to attract people. To get those customers, the majority of businesses and organizations advertise. So they have to reach those customers through different types of media. To do that is very complicated. So you have to understand your audience's profile in terms of demographics, behaviors, attitudes, and crucially, you have to understand what media that audience consumes. So what our platform does is it turns your customer into an artificial intelligent version of your customer with all those media consumption traits, with all those behaviors and attitudes. And basically your company or your organization can then query that artificial intelligent customer and ask, what TV stations do you watch? What radio stations are you listening to? What social media platforms do you visit? What websites are you on? And our platform will give you back an answer to that, not only an answer to that, but it'll break it down into the types of media, the percentages of media that AI customer consumes, the amount of money you should spend on that media to actually get the best return on your advertising investment. And crucially, after you've run your campaign through our software, our artificial intelligence and predictive analytics will allow you to understand what has worked, what hasn't worked, and predict the future KPIs within the business based on your advertising spend. So that's in essence what we do.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Olive. I'm from the Western Development Commission, and I work in the fund team within the Western Development Commission. So on St. Bridget's Day of this year, actually, the Western Development Commission has celebrated its 25th anniversary. So for the last 25 years, we effectively have been investing in businesses and communities within the western region of Ireland. So all the counties from Donegal right down to 7 counties from Donegal right down to County Clare. And so within the Western Development Commission, there's various arms. So there's the fund in which I work, there's the policy team, and there's the regional promotion and regional development teams. So just on behalf of the fund, effectively the way that fund works is that initially for the first number of years that the Western Development Commission was set up, we were given funds from the Exchequer, from the Irish government. And after 10 years, because of the fact that the fund was doing so well, the funds stopped from the Exchequer. So initially 30 million was provided to the Western Development Commission. And since then, we have effectively used those funds and reinvested 92 million back into the local economies. So and now presently the fund is worth 90 million. So in doing so, we have invested in approximately 354 projects. And they can be very small projects like local community centres, right up to something like where we are today, the Porter Shed. Where I particularly work is so there's various strands, there's various funds within the Western Fund itself, but where I work is in the equity side of the house. And also in doing so and investing those companies and businesses and community projects, what we have created is, and reports have been shown, is that we have created over 6,000 jobs, and 1 billion in other funds has been leveraged into the community. So effectively, for example, if I invest in a company like, say, Buymedia or Feeltech, the investment could involve maybe a 3 million round, and the Western Development Commission might possibly, in the first investment of any of our equity investments, it can be anything from 250,000 up to 1 million. But what I mean by funds leveraged is in the sense that, say, if in a 3 million round, we might invest maybe 300,000, 500,000, but it's that other private element of the other additional funds up to the 3 million that has enabled over 1 billion in funds to be invested in the local economy. I suppose, well, I can go delve very much deeper into, the types of companies in which we invest. I suppose from a sectoral point of view, we invest in anything from tourism to, it can be like, given the fact that we're in Galway, there's so much medtech businesses being set off, technology companies, but we're like, effectively, we're in risk, and we're open to risk, investing in any type of a broad range of companies. So as I said, it can be food and manufacturing, it can be natural resources. I have a brewery on my portfolio, and a huge number of medtech companies. I suppose the long and short of it is effectively the main mission of the fund team is just feeding into that funding gap. So people look to the Western Development Commission and they might say, oh, state agency, oh, they think government grants. That's not what we do. But effectively, lots of the first question that I would ask when companies come to us is, have you been to the likes of Enterprise Ireland? Have you been to the Leos and the leaders? They provide the grants. What the Western Development Commission do is, although we don't provide the grants, we can provide equity and we can provide loans. So it's quite a niche part of the economy. It's not a startup. It's an early stage company that would need to come to us pre the time, say it's before the time that the main financial institutions will invest in the company. So it's venture capital, it's risk capital that it's that funding gap. It's that gap in the middle that we are filling.
It's great. Andrew.
So, yeah, I'm Andrew Cameron. I'm the CEO of Feeltect. We're a connected health company developing technology for monitoring compression therapy, primarily for the millions of people that have venous leg ulcers. So essentially, a venous leg ulcer occurs when you have a breakdown of the veins in the leg, and then you use compression therapy to overcome that breakdown, restore the blood flow and heal the wound. But applying compression can be a really difficult task. If you apply it too loose, it's ineffective. And if you apply it too tight, it's actually dangerous to the patient. So we're developing a wearable device and a digital platform for monitoring the compression that these patients receive. And the idea is to not only help, say, the nurse put the bandage on, but help to engage the patient or their informal carers in the treatment process. And by doing so, we're looking to reduce healing times through consistent provision of gold standard therapy, but also to reduce the burden on the healthcare system by bringing care more into the hands of the actual patients and into the home care setting. So yeah, that's what we do.
Maybe a question for Andrew and Fergal together here. You guys can piggyback on the question. You've made this choice to found companies in the West, and that was a choice. I don't know your career story before that. Why did you guys make that decision?
I go first. First of all, Charles, to give you a bit of kind of serendipity, I think Jean-Pierre said something about healthy ecosystems. And I think that's something that the west of Ireland and probably the Celtic nations are very good at, is creating these healthy ecosystems. And I think one of the reasons that I decided to found the business here is because the west of Ireland has a hugely impressive startup healthy ecosystem. So we started off through an Enterprise Ireland program called New Frontiers, which basically helps you to, figure out whether you actually have a business or not. So you have an idea, you're an entrepreneur, you have some sort of crazy idea. Our crazy idea was that we could change the advertising and media world, right? And I'm based in a little village called Milltown, which is in rural Galway, so it's not even the city of Galway. And so sitting there in rural Galway, you're thinking, okay, I have an idea here that I could change the world. And the great thing about the West of Ireland ecosystem, and I'm sure it's the same for the Scottish and the Welsh and the Brittany ecosystem, is people don't think you're crazy when you say that. So Enterprise Ireland welcome you in and say, you know what, if you've got a crazy idea, try it. Let's put you on a New Frontiers program. You've got 6 months to figure out whether that's a business or not. From New Frontiers, and we did that in Mayo actually, which is in Castlebar. So we were in the Innovation Hub, there's an Innovation Hub in Galway and Mayo. So Innovation Hub in Mayo is where we did that New Frontiers program. From there, we were selected for an NDRC program, which is run here out of Portishead. And we were actually in the Dublin version. It was before it came to Galway. So we did it in Dublin. So I was traveling back and forth from rural Galway to Dublin to do that program. From the NDRC program, then we moved back to the west of Ireland. We got investment out of that program. Western Development Commission were one of the stakeholders in our investment. So we 3 angel investors. We had Western Development Commission and Enterprise Ireland, who were part of the fund. That allowed us to scale up the business. So it didn't matter to us whether we were in London, Paris, Dublin, wherever, because once the ecosystem was there for us to see there was a path to scaling from both a funding and a place perspective. So we're now in Platform 94, where we're now scaling the business. So we've gone from small innovation hub in Mayo, larger place here in Portishead, the bigger place again in Platform 94, all within a 20-30 kilometer radius of my home in rural Galway. We didn't need to go to Paris, we didn't need to go to London, we didn't need to go to Dublin or New York, even though now that's what we are doing. So now as we scale the business outwards, we see that we can do that from here. And we can see that we can now reach, the really interesting markets in France, the really interesting markets in the US, the UK, Scotland, Wales, from Galway. And there's no reason why we can't do that. So that's the journey we've gone on thus far.
Okay. Andrew?
So I'm a little bit further away from home. Ireland has a lot of accents, but mine isn't one of them. So, yeah, originally I'm from Australia. I did a PhD in tissue engineering, and then towards the end of that, I was really keen to get into commercialization. I tried to look for industry positions, but it was a little bit hard because Australia doesn't have a big tissue engineering industry. So I thought I'll come to Europe. But then I actually found it quite hard to get into industry, from another country into Europe. So the way I went about it was to do a postdoc in the Royal College of Surgeons. I came over to Ireland and worked for about 4 years in the College of Surgeons in Dublin. And yeah, I'd sort of really enjoyed my time there. It was a very applied group, but I still had that burning desire to get into commercialization and see, research actually reach the societal impact that it's intended for. And yeah, I started looking at how to do that. And one of the things that the West provided was a program called BioInnovate Ireland. And for an academic like me, you come from this sort of area where you're sort of always looking to work on a technology and then see how can we apply the technology. But BioInnovate Ireland is a needs-led innovation program that's based off the Stanford biodesign model. And essentially what it does is it looks for the unmet clinical need first. It's almost a taboo to think about the solution. You have to identify what is the need. And to do that, we spent some time actually working both in the Irish hospitals, so looking at observations within the hospital system. And then we went over to the Mayo Clinic in the USA and we did the same thing there. We just observed clinical procedures looking for an unmet clinical need. And with that, we identified this need in the wound care space that we took back to Ireland. And we sort of had this idea of sort of making a technology that, could be quite complex and quite complicated. But one of the heads of nursing at the University of Galway, Professor Georgina Gethin, was a world-leading expert in wound care. And it was her that said, look, we don't need anything as complicated as that. If we just had a way of implementing traditional compression therapy more effectively, that would have a huge impact for, you know, these wound care patients. And so, you know, that's where I then started a 2-year project within the University of Galway, supported by Enterprise Ireland. And that kind of de-risked the technology enough that we could bring it to, all right, now this is a point where we can actually take this out into a spin-out company. So we took the technology from there. We went through a couple of different accelerator programs, like the NDRC, for example. We did it tough, like starting out around the time of 2020. So COVID was a difficult period to enter the startup market. But eventually we raised some funds, and that was very much supported by organizations like WDC, Enterprise Ireland, and now Udaros Nagalta, where we have, I guess, a strong supportive base from the state agencies, but not just that, a really, really strong supportive base from the medtech sector. Like Galway punches above its weight, you know, in terms of how many medtech companies are here. And it's actually a global hub for medtech excellence. And that is almost like a trickle down from the big Medtronics, the big Boston Scientifics, J&Js, you know, through to the early stage startups like us that are being supported by programs such as BioInnovate Ireland. So yeah, a very supportive ecosystem for my industry in particular in the West, I found.
So it sounds like a lot of hand-holding and helping organizations really put into place, allowing you to play with your ideas, get them going. Great things are happening. You're making connections, but we're talking about scaling and scaling your business. And this is maybe when things get a little more challenging, right? If you guys were to list 3 things that are the biggest challenges for you right now in scaling, what would they be?
I said, once someone said to me once, the most important thing for an entrepreneur is not to run out of money, right? So as long as you keep cash in the business will be okay.
Yeah.
So scaling is for me kind of a number of things. So first of all, the funding. So you have to make sure the funding is in place, the funding is adequate to get you to the next step of your journey. You need a team, so you can't do it all on your own. So I was a solo founder starting off. I didn't have any co-founders. And building up a really strong team around you as well is hugely important. So the funding and the team. And I think things like today, like making the connections with international potential businesses, partners, is going to be the next step for probably business like ourselves and Andrews, which is how do you then get off the island? Because we've scaled really well on the island.
Yeah.
And we're like, 7 million ARR revenue. We've got a team of over 20 people now. In the space of 4 years, we've grown 128% cumulative annual growth rate in terms of revenue. So the business is going really well, but 90% of that revenue is still on the island of Ireland. So the next step for us to become a global ad tech platform, which is our ambition here, scaling it here from Galway, is how can we make those international connections? So how can we talk to partners? How can we talk to clients? How can we talk to, I think Joan mentioned universities. Universities, we've got really good relationships here with the University of Galway in terms of training their marketing graduates in our software as they come out of college. So how do we create those sort of connections with universities in Brittany, Wales, Scotland, partners in Scotland, Wales, Brittany? How do we create those connections that are now then become warm introductions that then become potential business and partners and funding and research and development connections. So it's those things.
I got you 3. Money,
Mm-hmm.
team,
Mm-hmm.
and connections. Andrew, what's your 3?
Yeah, surprisingly, it's very much aligned with the same things. Like, in the med tech space, right? Money, it takes a lot of money and it takes a long time to get to market and to see a return of investment. And that requires specialty investors, people that like understand that process and not just understand it, but have enough money to support that process. And, like we can go and look for money overseas, but like I've been told by numerous international venture capitalists that you need to have someone in your home, like country supporting you, that we can then have credibility in you and that there's someone close to you that can look out for what's happening with our money. So we have to go to the Irish investment community first. And the Irish investment community, it's just not a big enough island to have like a huge number of people. But it is actually, I guess, let's say, enticed by the support the state agencies, you know, again, WDC, Enterprise Ireland provide, and also the tax incentives that are provided, EIS, for example, to like promote that idea of investing in startup companies, which is really important. And then, you know, in terms of like the connections, I mean, Ireland is a small market, and so like the investors want to see you have that ability to scale and to go overseas. And, you know, I mean, I guess Ireland's in a fortunate position in a number of ways, because it's almost this gateway between the US market and the continental European market. So there is a connectivity, but you do have to get out there. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, I've been sort of in Switzerland, in Germany. I'm heading to London next week, like doing a lot of travel, trying to sort of make these connections, like Fergal's saying. And, you know, it's important to not just think about Ireland, because Ireland's just not a big enough market to support us. We need to get out there and internationalize. And then the people, I mean, like, yeah, with the number of companies here, I mean, Ireland is an exceptionally talented country, but it's also limited by the number of people that are available. So, you know, when you're competing to like pay someone, like they're looking at a salary that Medtronic offers, and they're looking at a salary that a startup offers, and, you know, like you have to sweeten it in a number of different ways. And I think the panel before, we're sort of talking about ways that you can do that by, like, you know, remote working options, etc. But yeah, like exciting someone to get into the industry of startup business is a challenge.
Okay, you guys have very similar problems. Money was one of them, and I want to get on the fun, Olive, and talk about it. I feel like you guys were extremely progressive when this was started, you know, 2 decades ago. I compare it to what I see in France, and there's really some interesting mechanisms for financing from France. Very often they're in Paris. BPI is one of the biggest sovereign investment funds in the world, and really helps you out with those initial tickets, right? 25K, 50K, whatever you need to get going. Obviously, I keep on hearing about Enterprise Ireland and the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystems, but I compare to investment funds in Brittany, and they have a common problem, is deal flow. So you hear from them, oh, we don't got enough money. And I hear from the investors, well, we don't have any interesting deal flow. So I'm trying to understand on your day-to-day, because that is a huge challenge, right? You have a lot of people knocking on the door. You want innovative projects. You can't just throw money out there. You have to be smart about this. So to try to give us a better feel here about the ecosystem right now. Obviously, valuations are not the same that they were 4 years ago. So what are you seeing right now? What's happening in the Irish ecosystem that you're investing in?
Yeah, exactly. Well, what I'm seeing right now, actually, I suppose, part of what we do is, so as I said, we make an initial investment, and that is from the 250 to up to 1 million mark. And what we also do, unlike Enterprise Ireland, is that we go the journey with the various businesses. So you might have an initial seed round, and we'll follow it later as the company grows and scales and develops, and there could be a bridging round. So we go the journey. So it's not just the initial investments that we make. So you can have follow-on bridge rounds and potentially then off to the seed round. So it's about going the journey, once you make an investment in a company, you're quite involved. You're quite involved in the company itself. You're nowhere near steering it or anything like that. But you can be sitting on boards. You can be as an observer position. So you're really going the journey with the company. But just in terms of where we are right now, I suppose, in the economy, the way we're seeing it is just there prior to Christmas, I was on a board, and effectively the board of directors were deciding, and this is quite commonplace now, is that, oh, are we going to go now with the 5 to 7 million round in 2024, or are we going to go to the 20-30 million round? And this was being discussed. And my own view on it at the time was effectively, I think we're going to have to go between the 5 to 7 million round. Things are tighter at the moment. Venture capitalist elbows are sharper. So at the time, it went around the table, and what the conclusion at the time was, let's try and ride both horses. So that's what the board went with. But roll forward 4 months, and effectively now we're going with the 5 to 7 round. It's just funding is tighter at the moment. Valuations are lower, but you know, it's just the ebb and flow of investments. we are continually getting new inquiries in and trying to deal with them. But you know, valuations are down. So effectively, the way I see it and the way we are seeing it is that companies are going with the lower rounds. Often, in case we the way we can invest in a company is by a convertible loan note. So effectively, the round isn't priced, a valuation isn't being put on the company, so it gets them through the gap, gets them through the period.
What can we do to maybe help these founders? Obviously, you're covering maybe these Series A's, these seeds, maybe into the B. But some of these companies, when we really talk about scaling, and we see this in France as well, and France has put into place French tech and all those things, but there's a huge criticism because what happens is, well, hey, I started my company, and now to really compete on a global scale, I have to probably move. I have to be in San Francisco. I have to be New York because Series C and Series D is over there. So what can we do? I would say maybe in Ireland, and I'll let everyone answer, maybe in the Celtic countries as well, this to find a way to help finance these companies when they do get to that high point of scaling the Series C and Series D. What's the missing gap here? And what's the expectation for the founders?
I think it's probably, Charles, different depending on the type of company. I think for Andrew's company, that's probably going to take a longer time to get to like serious commercialization. It's really difficult for those companies right now. I think we've spent a lot of time over the last few months. Like I've been in New York, New Jersey, I've been in London, doing meetings with private equity firms, doing meetings with VC firms. And to Olive's point, the macroeconomic situation at the moment is pretty bad. You know, valuations are really depressed based on what they were even 18 months ago. Yeah. So we're talking to VCs that were giving us a higher valuation 2 years ago when our income was like half or a third of what it is now, but the valuations are less. So it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. But at the same time, I also believe that in our situation, we're in a better situation than Andrew because we've actually got revenue. You know, we're actually cash generative, we're cash positive, we're making a profit. So money will always follow good businesses. So again, it doesn't matter. It didn't seem to matter when I was in London or New York or New Jersey talking to these private equity and VCs that I was based out of a house in rural Galway and the business was working out of Platform 94 in Galway. It didn't make any difference to them where we were. All that mattered is you do an X amount of revenue, you've grown X amount over the last 4 years, you're profitable, and you've got a growth trajectory plan that's going to get us like a 10x return in 5 years' time. That's all they care about. At the end of the day, these VCs and private equity guys, they're money people. They're hard-nosed business people, and all they want is a return on their investment. If we can show them that, regardless of where you're based from a location perspective, you know, whether that's Lorient in Brittany or whether it's Wales or whether it's Scotland, it doesn't make any difference to them. The money will follow. But the challenge is for the businesses who are not quite at that commercialization, ready to explode stage, the money isn't going to go there. And that's the challenging piece for the market at the moment.
Yeah, like I think you can't just do away with like, you know, working with international VCs. Like I see them as more than just money, but also value add. I mean, they're the ones that have the connections in the markets that you're trying to internationalize into. So, you know, you do need to go to these international funding organizations and put yourself forward. But I think that can be helped by, you know, the support of the local organizations, you know, promoting them to those international funding agencies or funding firms, and saying like, look, you know, Ireland and Irish companies have made you a lot of money in the past. And that's the thing, is that there have been a large number of success stories coming from Ireland where, yeah, there's an actual sort of attraction that they should be seeing and they should be aware of for us to be able to go over there and have that credibility that, you know, like we can stand, you know, on a global stage and we can bring you as much money as like, you know, a US or, you know, European company.
We're almost running out of time, and I want to make sure that the audience gets to ask questions if they have some. If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll run over to you. Oh, did you have something to add on this piece here?
Well, I suppose just in terms of the challenges in the scaling side of things, I suppose what we see is effectively people are bringing on boards. You know, maybe I suppose quite a number of our companies are in the medtech. So you know, going to the US is the natural first step because you know the market is so significant there. And what they're doing is they're bringing on people onto the, onto the team that are, US marketeers, effectively paying very significant salaries. And maybe I suppose it's just approach that we need to consider, the Celtic companies reaching out to the other VCs within, the Welsh and Scottish regions, and going first to those and seeing, how can they bring us into the UK market, into the European market first, rather than just the natural step to the US.
Okay. I'm looking over. If you have a question, please raise your hand so I see it.
I think this is probably for Fergal, but I think AI is obviously going to be a huge theme over the next decade or whatever. I'd be interested to get your thoughts in terms of like even the next 2 or 3 years. I think OpenAI have basically said that GPT-5 is coming, and it's going to be a big leap compared to 4. Obviously, we're all kind of wowed with 4. What are your thoughts on that? Because ultimately, private equity and VC, that's their focus right now.
Yeah, it's where what I can see all the money is going into AI. Like they talk on Bloomberg about like 90% of VC money at the moment is going into, unless you have AI in your project, they're not investing. Sam Altman was on a podcast 3 weeks ago, and this is specific to our industry now, and he said that 95% of all tasks that are currently done by either an advertising agency, a creative agency, or a marketing team will be wiped out by AI within 5 years. So that all of those tasks will be gone. Anyone that's working in marketing or advertising, their tasks that they do on a daily basis, not their jobs will be gone, but the tasks that they do on a daily basis will be gone. And for us, what we need to look at then is, okay, how do we align our product to that potential future? So we're talking to our clients now about like, how far are you along that roadmap of like, have you brought AI into your business? Are you starting to look at AI as a way to accelerate your business? But it's going to be a hugely transformative thing, in not just in our business, but in businesses across the board. But I think it's about when people are thinking of a product, it's if you believe, let's say Sam Altman is off by 30% and it's still 65% of tasks are going to be automated by AI, then how is your product or how is your business, whether it's from a functional or process-driven way, going to bring AI into the business to help you with that? In our case, it's like, for us, an advertising campaign is a data point to feed AI. So we're looking at the KPIs within the business as data points. We're looking at the advertising campaigns as data points to feed potential future AI. So what we're doing now with the business is saying, look, whether you're going to use AI or not use AI, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen, but you need to prepare your business for it. So start ingesting all the data into your business, so you build up this like an AI brain within the business that you can then use whatever product comes down the line. So it is going to be hugely transformative. I think anyone that kind of guesses what it's going to be like is just, blown in the wind or whatever. But it is going to change all businesses and organizations for sure.
As we wrap up, I have a question. How can Celtic nations and the people that are in this room assist the scaling companies? What connections do we need to make maybe entering Scotland or Wales or Brittany easier for you guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, like we're already doing that. Like we have a big grant, the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund. And, that's us leading a consortium where we have the University of Galway and 2 other sort of companies to develop the next AI version of our own technology. And we're actually working with the Welsh Women's Institute or Innovation Centre. And the reason being is that they have, some of the biggest key opinion leaders in the world, like working in that center, that are then guiding our clinical trials. So it's this idea of like looking for options to bring in expertise and connect the dots, so that you can kind of strengthen your own, let's say, strategy and pathway. But like I think that's like, we're all in the same position. We have the same challenges, and we should work together to overcome those challenges, would be my thoughts.
Awesome.
I think, Charles, just it's events like this. It's like, it's bringing people together from all of the nations. So it's bringing the Irish business and stakeholder funding ecosystem together. It's bringing the French, it's bringing the Welsh, it's bringing the Scottish together. because it's like by making those small connections, big things can actually happen out of that. So it's how do we, I suppose, after this event, that it doesn't just die, you know, that those potential connections that come out of this don't just like flitter away or end up as like a brochure at the bottom of your drawer that you never look at again. It's how do we encourage the connections to happen. So I think for most businesses probably, and most organizations, what we need those partners, clients, potential people that you can deal with on both sides of the water. So again, to Andrew's point, we're looking into the UK is a massive market for us from an advertising perspective, 27 billion of advertising spend in the UK market. So again, for us to talk to Welsh and Scottish businesses to say, look, we have a product here that is already working in your country for clients that are based in either, you know, we've got clients in Denmark and Ireland that are working in the UK, but we've got very few UK businesses. Is there connections you can make? And I'm sure like the Scottish Business Network can connect us. I'm sure the chambers in Lorient can help us. And likewise, we'd like to help them. So like they've probably got amazing businesses there that want to come here or partner with us, or there might be a marketing technology that's a really good partner with us as well, that we can start to make those connections and make some commercial opportunities out of it.
I love it. Olive, last word?
Oh yeah, and all I just wanted to say on that was, I suppose it's just about the collective, and it was just touched on briefly in terms of the R&D. So our regional development side of the team, they're involved in EU projects all the time, 14 million since 2010 in EU projects. So I suppose it's harnessing particular projects that are quite relevant, you know, in terms of the seaweed, you know, harnessing the local areas. It's, you know, our rugged landscape in the west of Ireland is effectively the same as what's in Scotland. And I suppose it's trying to go for the European projects that, you know, for the greater good, lift, you know, all the regions.
Got one last question, Mark. Let me bring them. Oh, here we go. I'll come next to you then.
Thank you. Mr. Ruel mentioned about maybe the blockages of business between the Celtic nations, and could be language, could be state of mind. I personally believe in, you know, listening to the panelists and the previous one, that there's a kind of, we have a, you know, common identity and culture, and we understand the music and the traditions, but I think there's a blind spot, Charles, about what each of the Celtic regions actually offers concretely in terms of ecosystem, funding, facilities, sectors. And it could be an idea to bring maybe some kind of showcase on that to L'Oreal, so we all understand the assets. So if it's wound care, for example, where are you going to pick in a Celtic nation? That might be you mentioned, I think, Wales, Andrew. But probably that wasn't obvious. You had to find it. And I don't know where the capital of AI is in the Celtic nations, Fergal, but I hope by August we'll understand more.
Mm-hmm.
So challenge for you, Charles, how we can educate each other about
Probably need a good consulting firm to help us with this. All right. So thank you, guys. That was really interesting. And we were in Brittany, we've come to Ireland, and now we're going to go to Scotland, and we've got a great panel. Let's thank them again here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, we're going to get you mic'd up.
You? Good to see you. How are you keeping?
Yeah,
all right?
you know how to tick boxes at the end of
I'm
it.
just doing a little mic changeover. My mic is very quiet.
Nice to meet you. I'm not asking you any questions. Good news. I get to rest.
Your mic is more powerful than my mic. Do you want to talk though?
No,
Yeah. Talk to Alan.
yeah, well, I think people are
Think we're
talking, and
good?
they actually want to talk. A
Yeah, they
little bit,
do
but
actually. Yeah.
We'll get them to stop though.
Yeah. We'll give them two. We'll give them a second. I think we're 1, 2, 3, 4. You did it. I didn't mean to insult you. Sorry. It's for the Tom's person watching.
Yeah, no, but it's my notes.
I get it.
And I had to from the other one was quite long, so I don't know where I was.
Yeah.
I don't know where, because it was
Yeah.
long, right? So I'm
Yeah.
like, Do we have 10 more minutes left? Do you have 15 more minutes left? And when your time doesn't.
I will sit there and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Do you want to get people's attention there? So,
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
ladies and gentlemen. So as Charles said, we went to France, then we went to the west of Ireland. Now we get to go to Scotland, which is very exciting. So our next panel, and I'm glad that people are excited that we're going to Scotland. So let me just introduce our next panel, which is Scotland and Ireland working together to build a rural economy. So we have Katy McNeil, the head of Scottish Government Ireland office, Anna Sellars, senior rural business consultant, Scotland Rural College, Martin McBride, founder and owner of Envision Management Consultant, and Eve Ann McCarran, external engagement manager for the Atlantic Technological University. Want to grab a seat, guys?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much to Charles for the invitation to be here today and for our colleagues at Western Development Commission. It's really exciting and energizing to be here and to be amongst so many fellow Celts. As Charles has said, he gets a chance to have a short break just now. I am standing between you and your lunch, so I think we want to keep this moving and keep it really lively. I'm head of the Scottish Government office here in Ireland, which means I have the really difficult task of selling Scotland to Ireland and selling Ireland back to Scotland. It, in that sense, is not the hardest job in the world. It must be one of the nicest jobs in the world doing that. But there is so much we have in common and so much that connects us. So I thought we would focus today on some of the things that are going on in developing the rural economies in Scotland and Ireland, and have a really great panel here who are all doing stuff in those rural economies between Scotland and Ireland. What's similar is we both have really big rural hinterlands, and we deal with those challenges of remoteness and rurality. But what we've got coming up is some really amazing opportunities to grow, particularly around the renewable energy sector. And also to note for our Breton colleagues that at this event last year, Scottish Government and Brittany signed an MOU on cooperation on renewable energy. So that's definitely a subject that's going to be covered by the panel today. I will just really briefly introduce them. So Anna, we're going to get you, you're going to talk a bit about that rural connected hubs and some of those connections. Evan, you are here from ATU and you'll talk about some of the stuff, the work that's already going on between Scotland and Ireland, and particularly those strong links that Donegal and Scotland have. And then finally, we'll come to Martin, who is here as the founder of Envision, but also is the incoming chair of Causeway, which is a Scottish, Irish and Northern Irish business networking organisation. So a great person to make contacts with. I'd also just give a shout out to my colleague Keith Marin, who is sitting over in the corner on the sofa there. Keith is from our trade body, Scottish Development International. So please do go and talk to Keith if you are looking for support or information to get into Scotland. And of course, Russell, you've already been introduced. So with that, I will stop giving an introduction and I'll hand over to Anna.
Great, thank you. 5 minutes?
5, yeah.
Great, so as you can probably tell, I'm very excited to be here. I am a senior rural business consultant with SSE Consulting, which is the consulting branch of Scotland's Rural College. But I also work closely with the Rural Policy Centre, which sits within our research division. So I kind of sit between the research and consulting. I am working on a project at the moment investigating the role of co-working hubs and the impact of co-working hubs on rural areas. And we're looking at learning from the Irish experience and exploring what the potential might be for a similar network in Scotland. The context behind this project is that I myself relocated to West Cork in 2022. So I am living in one country and working in another. And you very quickly, doing that, begin to see a lot of cross-learning, a lot of frequently compare and contrast between the countries, and you start to see that there's a huge amount of overlap and common interest, and also things, conversations that could be had around kind of research and policy. And I do hot desk a couple of days a week, often in my local co-working hub. So I got started thinking about this, and was very keen to build more partnerships between the college and colleges over and universities here in Ireland. So we saw the grant fund, the network grant, advertised by the Royal Society of Edinburgh and the Royal Irish Academy end of last year, and started a conversation with Mary O'Shaughnessy from UCC, who's here today as well. And we both put in this project. So the principle being that there's a huge amount of common challenges between rural Ireland and rural Scotland, aspects of a history of rural depopulation, challenges about housing, infrastructure, access, and historically a lot of professional age people leaving, a brain drain from rural areas. But there's also strengths of certain aspects of rural policy that Scotland is particularly strong at. It's got a real clear focus at the moment on net zero and natural capital. There's a lot of activity going on there, and also pilots in the area of community wealth building, 20-minute neighbourhoods. And in Ireland, there's obviously a very strong rural development agenda and a very strong history of supporting rural enterprise. So a huge amount that could be learnt there. The aims of the project itself are to look into what work has been ongoing, quite extensive work ongoing in Ireland, looking at evidencing what is the impact of these hubs on rural areas, and trying to understand as well the process of development, who was involved in that, which stakeholders, what key policies were involved in influencing that, also what finance was necessary. And at the moment, we are beginning to unpick the current state of play in Scotland as well. So it turns out there are actually quite a lot of hubs across Scotland, co-working hubs, and with a very strong social enterprise focus, but they're not coordinated under one particular network, and many of them are in contact with each other. So there's a lot of opportunity there. A particular challenge for Scotland is that it's much more, remote parts of Scotland are much more remote. They're about 4 times as remote as the most remote parts of Ireland. The infrastructure in the remote parts of Scotland is very challenging. So hybrid work would be very challenging, certainly. So there's a lot to unpick there around what might work. Might there be pilots that we could start investigating? And we've had some early conversations. We have a workshop coming up with a lot of very enthusiastic Scottish hub owners and those involved in the regional enterprise agencies in having this conversation about maybe the network needs or would like to have a common vision and a strategy, and hopefully leverage some funding to start exploring that. So that's where we are at the moment.
Thanks, Anna. I think that's really interesting. We definitely spotted Paddy and myself, who I forgot to introduce there, my deputy here. So again, please speak to Paddy about Scotland. But we really spotted the connected hubs as a model that would be of interest in Scotland. And I know our ministers have been interested, and I'm very grateful to WDC and Uderus for introducing us to a few of the hubs, including Portishead and also at Gweedore before. So I think, Anna, that work's going to be really valuable in helping us really understand how might we make use of those in Scotland. Over to you, Evan.
Okay, somebody thought I was from Scotland earlier by my lovely Donegal accent, so this kind of maybe sets the tone for why we're so close. I work with the Atlantic Technological University, and I'm based in the Donegal campus, so travelled from there this morning. And I'm delighted to be here to be part of this, where we're going onto the Galway campus later this afternoon to work with students on innovation, so it works in perfectly. Just to give a bit of context, the Atlantic Technological University is one of the newer universities across the island of Ireland, and it was really an intention of government to elevate the role of the technological universities or the institutes of technology across the island in terms of their regional role, in terms of driving economies and driving regional development. We were formed on the 1st of April, just 2 years ago, so we're just 2 years old. But we have a very long-standing legacy and history in the region. So from Mayo all the way up to the top of Donegal, we're really covering a geography that's equivalent to the size of Wales. So if you look at that from a context of it's spread out, it's rural, it's peripheral, it's had its challenges, but what you've also seen there is a huge demonstration of resilience and how people navigate whenever some of the things are actually up against you and how you still strive to be kind of successful. As a university, we have just approximately almost 24,000 students. We have about 2,500 staff that are kind of academics and support and management. And again, with the formation of us being a university, we work very closely with our partners in Enterprise Ireland and Western Development Commission in terms of really driving forward that research and innovation agenda for the region. Because the reality is we need more of it. And it's brilliant to see the kind of companies that are speaking here today, because it's the kind of stories we want to share back into our student population to let them see what is possible, what can be achieved. Because sometimes, you know, we get caught up in the rhetoric of what's not possible rather than seeing what is possible. I suppose just from a perspective of the university and areas of focus, we've had a number of kind of collaborations with Scotland over a number of years. I suppose one demonstration of that is the Bryden Centre, which is a research and industrial PhD research centre, which was focused, it came out of, it was Interreg funded in 2017-2021 programme. But really what that saw was a collaboration between Queen's University in Belfast, ourselves, and what would have been the Letterkenny Institute of Technology in Donegal, and the University of the Highlands in the Islands. So again, that secured, and that collaboration and that coming together was kind of a shared need and a shared vision around the harnessing the kind of opportunity of the land and the sea to kind of drive those kind of regions and understanding where the opportunities were. That collaboration secured €9.3 million of investment in terms of research, and some of those projects again have kind of continued to grow and develop. Following that, the university, I suppose, continued to back the kind of offshore and renewable sector, and also the whole blue economy in terms of what it means to our region. So it was kind of playing off the strengths that we have and how do we kind of utilise that to kind of drive forward the region. And we secured funding through Enterprise Ireland, had an initiative which was around regional technology clusters. So again, playing to our strengths, we focused on the formation of a Killybegs marine cluster. Martin has been kind of instrumental with some of the companies in terms of actually pushing that whole agenda forward. But Killybegs is probably one of our kind of sleeping giants, I think, whenever we actually think what it is that we offer as a region, especially whenever we look towards offshore and wind. There's a lot of talk in Ireland at the moment about the grid and the infrastructure, and what I'm learning quite quickly is that the people that are interested in the asset that we have are looking from the sea inwards as opposed to looking from the land outwards. And when we start to look from the sea inwards, and it's no different, I think, to Scotland in that context, they see probably a greater opportunity than sometimes we actually let ourselves believe. And we've seen it in Killybegs that through necessity, it has become one of the kind of leading fishery ports. It is primarily a fishing port. But what we're seeing more and more is the fisheries and the engineering sector, which is extremely strong in that area. These are brilliant minds. These are people that solve problems day in and day out, and they just do it as part of what they do. And I feel we're quite privileged that we have that on our ecosystem, but it's also about how we utilise the relationships with Scotland and our other Celtic cousins to kind of really position Ireland as a kind of, you know, a leading kind of light in that whole sector. So again, but before that, I had the joys of working with Scotland many times because I worked for an aquaculture company in Donegal, so it was a salmon farming company, and I had the joys of kind of navigating from Glasgow up to kind of Fort William, so I understand the challenges, and it felt like home, so it was okay.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Ivan. And actually, you're just building on the stuff about offshore, about the blue economy, which our Breton colleagues were telling us about this morning. It's definitely something we all have in common there. And of course, Scotland's got that long tradition in oil and gas and offshore, which is something that we can offer back to our other colleagues. And I think that should lead quite nicely into Martin.
Yes,
over to you.
Good segue. I'll pick up on some of those themes. First off, moving back to our rural location, I left North Donegal, walking the dogs at dawn this morning on the beach beside 3 golf courses that I was going to introduce to our friend who wants to play golf. I'll catch up with him after. But I drove down, and so it was a pleasure to drive here because I went to college here nearly 40 years ago. And when I walked in, then we have a presentation looking at carbon fiber and racing yachts. And the first time I learned how to sail an Ocean 60 racing yacht was in Les Sables d'Olonne. Unfortunately not Lorient, but just down the coast a little bit, which was a long, long time ago. I was about 20 kilos lighter and much stronger. So that was some years ago. But looking at, I suppose, picking up some of those marine and rural strands, SMEs, I suppose I have a commitment to as the backbone of rural economies. It's great to bring SMEs to hubs. I also, I suppose, have a strong belief in basing those SMEs in those regions. So we build strong income streams through people living in those communities, but strong balance sheets with companies that then create wealth and can spin that wealth off into supply chains and other investments in ownership in those communities also. And that's one of the things I suppose I started to do at a young age. And one of the first really important lessons I learned picking up the theme of collaboration was actually in another very rural area, though not a Celtic one, in the northeast of Denmark, in Ebeltoft, a chap called Paul Buriel, who I approached about a collaboration when I was in an early stage business when I was quite young. And I was asking him to collaborate with me. And I realized fairly quickly that I wasn't ready for that conversation because I had a great technology. We had a pretty good company, but we hadn't figured out what it meant to be a good partner. And fortunately, Paul was wise enough and patient enough with me as a young cub to walk me through what that meant. Because, you know, having a great technology is a huge opportunity. It's also a huge risk if you don't have the company structure to make it happen and you haven't figured out how to be a good collaborative partner, because you're asking that other party to intertwine their business fortunes with yours. And that collaborative model I've always felt was really important, because SMEs in going out into international markets maybe don't have all the strengths that are needed to take on that fight. So that partnership approach has been central to a lot of things I've done. So accelerating on, and I suppose picking up the Scottish theme, it's something I've done quite a lot in Scotland in a number of different guises. The choice of Scotland for me was partly serendipitous. I've always wanted to live in rural economies, and my choice of Scotland was partly through love of the mountains and love of sailing. And the Celtic route, particularly, that I sailed on a couple of occasions with a friend from Inverness that took us as far as Shetland and Lerwick. And in fact, I got to know people then in combining life and business opportunities. And in spending a lot of time in the Scottish Highlands and in Shetland, and combining that with the strengths that Ivan has mentioned in Killybegs, I got to know a couple of guys personally in business in Shetland. One in particular is a company called Ocean Kinetics, which is a very competent, very strong marine engineering company. And over the last couple of years, we have formed a collaboration with MMG Ocean and Killybegs, one of the Killybegs marine cluster. And we looked at that opportunity. And for example, you were saying, for example, I've forgotten your name, that Ireland isn't a huge market. Actually, the one huge market that Ireland will offer us, because we have the one thing that we have the biggest of in Europe is ocean. So in terms of offshore wind and floating wind, we potentially could be the biggest in Europe. We have that huge opportunity, and Kinetics is absolutely committed to getting into the Irish market. MMG Ocean wants to scale, and we wanted to combine smart money with ambition and access to the Irish market. So Kinetics and I personally then invested in MMG Ocean to look at positioning ourselves for what will become, I think, one of the biggest offshore wind opportunities in Europe and in the world over the next 15 years. And we, in fact, plan to scale 5x over the next few years before really anything substantial goes out there floating through the prototyping, design, and engineering planning phase. As Ivan says, phenomenally talented engineers, problem solving, and some of the problems haven't even been defined yet. So that is critically important. Collective strength as SMEs, really important. The ability to combine those strengths and work in harmony to a common purpose and a common objective. And that then, I suppose I've widened that objective from my personal business interests into Causeway and the cluster, because the Killybegs cluster allows Killybegs to position itself with governments and attracting research funding and attracting recognition as a port that will be central to the future of offshore wind. And Causeway then connects Ireland and Scotland. And I think that if Scotland and Ireland work together, we will have a substantial opportunity to grow a big position in offshore wind. And if we don't, And we fly solo. I think the Norwegians and the Dutch will come in and take huge amounts of market share, which is not a bad thing necessarily. Competition is healthy, but actually we need to grow our critical mass, and collective strength allows us to do that. And Causeway partly helps us to do that. Causeway is a voluntary organization, and as was said, I'll be the chair from next year. And we are working on bringing people together to make business connections through social gatherings, through events like this, that some of which we organize and attend, but also through, I suppose, the industry events where we take a deeper dive into some sectors, and we will be doing that in renewables this year in conjunction with Scottish Government, Irish Government, and interested parties, and running events not at the top end of policy in offshore wind, not looking at the megawatts and the mega millions, but looking at the dark corners of supply chain opportunities for smaller companies in rural regions where they can access contracts that are valued in the hundreds of thousands and in the millions, and not in the tens and hundreds of millions. So accessible for SMEs. We do that voluntarily. We want to attract membership and interest. We want to help people make connections. So happy to talk to anybody about Causeway as the day goes on.
That's fantastic. Now, we don't have a huge amount of time and we do need lunch. I was going to ask lots of questions, but actually I think I would like to put it over to the audience and see if we can get a conversation going with the audience. So does anyone have any questions to kick off?
We're all thinking of their lunch.
Everyone is too hungry for that. I'll maybe ask you, Anna. Obviously, Ivan and Martin have both talked about those opportunities and clusters around the offshore renewables and the blue economy. In the research that you've started to do just now, are there any other areas of sort of synergy, complementarity that you're starting to see?
Yes, I mean, the social enterprise focus in Scotland, in the hubs that we've spoken to so far, I think there's a huge amount of cross-learning there, of similar experiences. And I think that the communities angle, the community wealth building. So community wealth building is probably quite an academic concept, but and maybe it's not, it's quite a Scottish terminology, but there's a lot of similarity there. I know, the connected hubs are very interested in kind of tracking and looking at the wider social benefit and economic benefit. Our Rural Future has a key part of the policy around placing these hubs in towns and villages to enable that wider social benefit. So, and that there's an overlap there with 20-minute neighbourhoods as well. So I think there's a huge amount of synergies, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. It looks like we do have a question from the floor. Thank you, Charles.
This is just a general question. Like we found it quite difficult to deal, with UK since Brexit. Like just vendors that would have been very readily available to us and willing to trade with us, especially smaller ones now just shutting down and not even taking orders, for example. I mean, have you got any ideas for support that we could, in particular, say with Scotland, overcome some of those barriers? Because we do actually miss that, that exchange.
I can speak to the experience. I used to work with the local enterprise offices before I joined the university, and we would have had similar experience of SMEs on the island, where Ireland was getting very well geared up with the fear and the threat of Brexit and what all of that was going to bring. And maybe some of the, whenever they were trading into the UK, I think there was probably, the two things weren't moving in tandem at the same pace. So it made people maybe step away from trading outside of the UK as opposed to kind of maybe trying to get, so it was very, very challenging. But I think, to be fair, connections like yourselves, plus the use of the local enterprise networks and the Enterprise Ireland should be used to try and kind of facilitate, I know the trade missions and those matchmaking opportunities are a way of.
Yeah, and I would say there's maybe help and support available through, we've got Scottish Enterprise and also Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And of course, my colleague Keith deals a lot with the trade. Actually, his side is a lot of the trade from Scotland coming into Ireland. But I think it's still, it is still relatively I'm trying to get Quayside. It is still relatively healthy and increasing. I guess we do have the advantage of proximity and language. And if you're needing to move people, the common travel area, which possibly makes it easier between Scotland and Ireland, then perhaps we wish it was still as easy as possible with our Breton cousins, but sadly not. But yeah, certainly if there's specific policy issues, we can take them back. I know the British Irish Chamber of Commerce have been discussing some of those specific barriers as well. So happy to follow up. We want to make it easy.
It has become harder in the last 6 months, actually, because some of the regulations that were kicked down the road have now come into effect. So in practical terms, from our trading experience, it's about finding the right expert. It is navigable, but you need to find the right expert. And we spent some energy and time finding a few people who said they were and weren't, but we now have a couple in our sector who know about the products and the codings and the documentation. It's a pain in the backside, but it is absolutely navigable, but you have to find the right partner.
Logistics. Yeah, we're paying as much for delivery charge as we are paying for like
Yeah. It makes life more difficult. There's no question or doubt about that. Yeah, unfortunately. One final point I should have said, actually, on the collective strength, and I know you want lunch. We started off talking to each other in Kinetics and Shetland and MMG and Killybegs, trading across Scotland and Ireland and the UK, confronting that reality. Our collective strength has now allowed us to become an entity that can look out into the world much more effectively, and we are building some significant international business. And in fact, just to close the loop on where I started, we are both visiting Ossia and Pirieu, significant French shipyards, in the next few weeks, and hadn't actually connected that in my head as a topic for today, but as a coincidence, we're visiting those two guys in the next few months. Okay.
Great, thank you. Do we have any final questions? We have got more time. Well, that's very generous. Don't want to keep you away from your lunch too much. Just want to pick up a bit on some of the cultural similarities, and I guess we've kind of mentioned music as a particular connection. I guess how do we leverage that as Celtic nations?
Can I tell you a story? And it was an accident. Michael Fox from Motion Kinetics is probably one of the best accordion players you will ever meet. Martin McGuinness, who is the managing director of MMG Ocean, has a daughter who is an incredible fiddler. And my wife is a mean fiddler and flute player. And entirely by accident, we formed the collaboration of these companies for commercial reasons. But they spent 2 whole days last summer touring the sessions of Donegal, playing music and drinking Guinness. And it was phenomenal. Now, it wasn't part of the purpose, but as a byproduct, it's a pretty damn good byproduct.
To get them over to Lorient for the Internet Celtic. I know, Anna, you also are a musician?
I am, yes, and that is one of the things that drew me to Ireland. I've wanted to move to Ireland since I was a child. So it's been a lifelong dream of living in Ireland and being able to play as much music as I possibly can. But I also think there is a really important connection there around rural development and regional development. In the lifelong passion for me, anyway, is trying to support thriving and sustainable rural communities. And I think there's a really important part there. It's not just about supporting culture on a national level, but it's also being able to encourage regional and local differences and traditions. There's a huge amount of variation in Ireland. I mean, it's well known, and there's pockets of concertina music and fiddle music and piping. But even in Scotland, you know, there's Gaelic, there's Doric, there's Shetland dialect, there's piping traditions, there's very different singing traditions. I'm just talking from a musical perspective now, because that's what I know about. And if we're not able to support people of all ages to live well-rounded lives in the areas that they choose to or want to be in, whether they're from there or not, I think we do risk losing that regional and local culture. So I think it's hugely important to everything, not just from a cultural perspective, from an economic perspective too.
There's an example in Donegal at the moment that I think is about to add exactly to that point, and it was the Donegal ETB was dealing with some of the companies that were based in your region, the tweed manufacturing. So there was a huge challenge there in terms of, it was like a day in skill, there wasn't enough people coming through. But what we were actually finding is that these brands that are developed from really rural areas, like the fishermen, like McNucas, they're sought after kind of products worldwide, but they had a huge challenge in their supply chain in terms of how do they get the next generation of tweed, you know, being made and people coming through that actually have the skill to weave. So Donegal ETB tied in with Scotland, I can't think of the Highland,
Harris Tweed.
Harris Tweed, and Harris Tweed were so generous because exactly that very thing that you're talking to, Anna, it was a generational business that had handed on from generation to generation. A new CEO came in and kind of wanted to kind of, you know, make sure that they kind of protected. I think they were going after a PGA for their protected geographic indication. And then Brexit happened and that's kind of created a stumble in the block on that. But they've been hugely generous back to the Donegal Tweed, who is currently going after a PGA application. But equally what they did was they took trainers from Donegal, brought them to Harris Tweed, and it's the certification that these people are getting is from Harris Tweed. But it's that piece of celebrating what's different about us, but equally it's kind of finding the things that are challenging for one another and utilizing those relationships to make something new happen. And it's bringing, I think I saw something in a local paper recently today about somebody coming from Europe because they came to Donegal because they wanted to learn to weave, and now they're kind of working for one of the companies locally. So it's that circularity, and it all adds to what we're trying to do.
It all adds and it makes those communities more sustainable. I'm delighted to say that there is a delegation from Donegal Tweed heading over to Harris next week, actually. So there is going to be a celebration of that tradition. And I think that, these are the things which make the rural economy thrive, not only the fantastic companies. Any final questions from the audience? No, okay, so shall we can allow lunch to happen. Thank you so much, everyone. I really look forward to chatting more over lunch in this evening.
Thank you.